And so it's a new state on the evolutionary track. So I'm more evolved than regular mortal humans. I was declared to have been somebody who had gone clear in a past life, which would have been my last life.
Even though supposedly the tech wasn't there for somebody to go clear.
Well, you can go clear. Well, no, Dianetics was written in 1950. And he was talking about the state of clear in Dianetics. It was not until they wanted that they... I personally believe that, it's just that there's always something being re-released because it never was quite correctly done or understood. And all the people who went clear last lifetime, even though they may have been on OT8s, were pulled back in because in New Era Dianetics, which was a later way of going clear, there was a different criteria. There were different criteria for what was a clear and getting rid of an engram, which is a whole thing. And so you had to go in and get all the postulates off.
At your point, what were you supposed to achieve as a clear?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, this is a funny thing for me, and this is I mean, if you read Dianetics, I mean, the state of clear is somebody who is never likely to get sick. He has a perfect memory. It's even intimated, and this was in 1950 when there was no, is that he could be immortal. He may never die. It's pretty funny. And so that's what the state of clear is. They define it as no longer has his own reactive mind, which is a rigged game to get somebody to take OT levels, which is their real moneymaker. But the what? Oh, so I don't know. So clear. So, but like I said, I've never. There's a guy on the internet apparently who's saying, I'll give you $1 million if you can demonstrate OT. I'll give $1 million to anybody who can demonstrate clear. There's no fucking clear. There's no clear. There's no clear. I mean, just looking in Dianetics, there's no clear. Clear is basically. I mean, what are you kidding me? Clear. So I was like, if I get this, that's what I was going for. It's too good to be true. And that's basically it. And that goes back to that feeling of loss, is because, you know what it is? I'm sorry to say. See, and I'm actually realizing something for myself right now, because this is cathartic in a way for me, but it's the same feeling. That loss is the feeling that I got. Like, I'm no stupid guy. I grew up in New York City. And I mean, I never got mugged. I mean, I know, and I've been through some serious bad neighborhoods. But I remember one time I was living on my own down in the village, and I saw this guy running across the street, and he had like a VCR. This is back when VCRs were a new thing, like a plasma TV or something. And he's like, he'd obviously stolen the thing, and he's like, hey, you can have this for $50, right? And I bought it, took it home. And it was full of bricks and shit, and I was fucking I got conned. And that's the feeling of loss. Because it actually, going back, you're asking me about clear, it's a con. It's a con. And like any, and it's an interesting, I mean, this is way segueing, but this is something I don't know if it'll be, it's interesting, is that, there's a book that LRH wrote called The History of Man. And he talks about a lot of these traps that can catch a thetan, which is something that has no matter any space, time, or location. But it can catch a thetan. But he's got interest and curiosity, right? And so there's these things called theta traps. And so, and the best theta traps are ones that the thetan runs on autopilot. Like if I'm trying to enslave somebody, the last thing I want to do is have to worry about fucking, keeping the key and the lock and the best traps, you get a guy to just keep himself in jail, right? And that's what Scientology does. You just keep yourself in jail, and that that's it. It's a perfect theta trap, because you believe it, and you are investing your time and your money, and so it's, you can't be a fool. That's too much to confront,
When you were a kid, you were saying you were able to look at your dad or your uncle and you could really perceive them and understand them and know them.
Yeah.
When you looked around at the people in the org and you trusted them, do you think there was a misperception there, or were you?
Well, I tell you, I got to be honest, is that the more I got in, the stupider I got. As I get out, that's my perception. The less, Christ, you don't even ask questions. That's what I was trying to remember the other day, that I was going to say that I had forgotten. Like this thing, I got into, they made me as commissioner of CCHR. I'm talking to Tory. And the
CCHR is?
Because Citizens Commission on Human Rights is a way to try and destroy psychiatry and psychology. And I was like, fine, I don't give a shit. And so, they put my name on their stationery, and fine, it got me out of an ethics cycle or something. So I said, okay. And, but I would go, and I always had questions, because I would, even L. Ron Hubbard, he would always call the psychs, and he would rail about them and how terrible they are, and they're the sole course of destruction. But he would never, I kept saying, his own technology says that's a generalization, the psychs. Who? Psychs on the whole track. That means all psychiatrists for billions of years in the history of theta. It's like, it's so general, and that would be that's a characteristic of a suppressive person, is one who speaks in generalities. And another one is a person who has overts, which are sins or crimes committed, is somebody who's, antagonistic or angry. And he seemed very antagonistic and angry about sex. So I was thinking he must have, overts on him, and he's speaking about them in generalities. But the thing about it, I was thinking about that I went over to CCHR and got tours ad infinitum by the directors, this woman, Jan Eastgate, and I would ask questions, and she'd write me up in ethics chits and shit, and I said, fine, yeah, I got the question. I don't fucking know. But I would say, if you want me to represent Scientology's viewpoint, and you go to their museum, it's all the psychs are bad, the psychs are bad, this is a bad thing, and Hitler, and they're responsible for child pornography and rape, and it's all the psychs. And I say, okay, that's their viewpoint. I say, but if I'm going to get into a discussion, if you want to prepare me to be a spokesman for this shit, I got to know the other side. So, and I kept asking, can you give me the other side? And they won't give it to you. And every time I would push it, I'd be like, honey, there's no way to get into the argument. They're not, if it's all this is true, there wouldn't be anything. I got to know their viewpoint. How am I going to win the argument? You know what I mean? And they wouldn't give me the viewpoint. And it was like, and then they started to write me up because I'm doubting. I'm not saying I'm doubting or nothing. I'm just waiting for the data, which is this whole big thing about learning how to think correctly is this other course called the Data Series. And basically you have to get all the data. They won't give you any fucking data on certain things. And especially about this. There's nothing written in all the tomes of Scientology about psychiatry. Nothing other than the psychs are responsible for all your sexual problems because they implanted you as a thetan 10 years ago. And I realized that on my research of OT10. Oh, well, then it must be true because LRH says it's so. It's really, you see how at a certain point you get conned. And I was saying, where's the fucking data? I'd say to everybody. And they'd show you, and nobody's allowed to tell you anything. So they pull out a reference. They always pull out this fucking reference called pain and sex. And there's like, he's talking about pain and sex are these things that are really just dogging people and bothering them. And it's a really difficult thing that we're trying to help you with in Scientology. And basically, there's maybe 2 sentences in there where LRH says, through my research on the whole track of OT something or other, I just discovered that this is all because of psychs. And that's the reference they tell you to prove that the fucking Hitler and rape is a thing. And I'm like, honey, that doesn't quite handle it, but they don't get it.
Now, I look at this as an outsider, and to me, and I don't have a vast knowledge of this, but it seems like the psychiatric field sprung forth in the 1800s, or not thousands of years ago or millions of years ago. How are there psychs on the whole track?